meetings with like mayors and parliaments to talk about divestments, and also just like connected with grassroots movements over there, because I definitely really think that it's super important to connect, because you know these financial institutions that have so many power and that invest in these projects that desecrate our land and that don't respect the rights of people and indigenous people and the basic consent principle. They're all over the world and they invest in projects all over the world, and that's why I think it's like super important for us to connect our struggles, because everyone can get involved, even if, let's say, like in your country you don't have a pipeline, but you probably have a bank that's like invested in a pipeline, that's why I'm giving rights like abroad. So that's to say that after the tour, because of the tour, we're able to meet really inspiring women from indigenous communities that do amazing divestment work. One of them is in the organization called Mazaskatax that Christian talked about a little bit earlier. Mazaskatax is an indigenous-led divestment grassroots organization based in Seattle, and there was people that were going to camp at Standing Rock and they couldn't stay the whole time. They really wanted to support, and what they decided to do is to go back in Seattle and then create a divestment strategy, indigenous-led, but with non-indigenous allies as well, to pressure the city council to divest the money out of dépôt. And they were able, with a very little group of people, and it was not organizations, it was not like professionals, it was just like a group of really motivated people. They got the city to divest in like 4 months, $3 billion out of Wells Fargo, and they were the first in the States to do so, and then they created a toolkit and shared their strategy, and then many other divestment groups that got created all over the country and did divestments. And that to say that they shared their strategy when they toured in Europe with them. And I'm not a pro in divestment at all, but I got so inspired by what they've done, and I was like, hey, there's some stuff that's being done on divestment here in Quebec, and we definitely got to connect with these guys because it's so inspiring what they do. And now what they're putting in place, the tour in Europe, made them realize that they wanted to, pressure the divestment initiatives at a global level. So they're calling out right now on Divest the Globe Action Days. It's going to be like 23rd to 25th of October. And so they're calling grassroots groups of all over the globe to do divestment actions, to share their struggles, to pressure like the financial institutions that are funding projects that desecrate Mother Earth and that don't respect the consent of indigenous people and people in general. So they invited us to connect with groups here in Quebec, because Mazaskatax at the moment do not have connections with groups so much on the east side. They have connections with people in Kinder Morgan fighting in BC, fighting against Kinder Morgan, the Tiny House Warriors. So we're putting in place an action here in Montreal the 23rd of October that's going to be aiming Desjardins and their investments in fossil fuel projects, because they're investing $145 million in Trans Mountain Pipeline. Even if for the moment they have like a temporary moratorium on their future investments in fossil fuels, they're still investing right now, and it's our like main bank. So all of that to say is that like I really think it's definitely important to like connect internationally as well. And the divestment issue is so important because like money is ruling the world right now, but we can definitely attack it, and we have plenty of examples of indigenous-led divestment movement that have worked and that we can get inspired of. So I want to say that if there's some people here that would like to connect with Mazaskatax, what they're doing, and connect with us on the 23rd of October for the divestment action, you can definitely come and talk at the end of the battle. And I wanted to ask you a question, maybe to be able to connect Divest the Globe here with like struggle that you're having in your communities. I don't know if you know what are the financial institutions that fund the projects that create Mother Earth on your communities, and maybe we can like put them in light while doing divestment actions here like in Montreal. And I don't know if Desjardins by any chance is connected, but if so, we could definitely like call that out. And yeah.
invest in, I'm not really quite sure who's investing in them, but it's Alta Gas is the parent company. They're based in Calgary. And who gave them the right to come in, Mi'kmaq territory, first of all, was that the KMK organization that I was talking about gave them permits to come in and do the brining down there. But like we said, we're grassroots, so we don't deal with KMK, we don't deal with the governments, we don't deal with the chiefs. The chief and council, yeah, can go fuck themselves. Just like the government. But yeah, that's basically it. I don't know, just all the gas. And like that KMK is an organization that's funded by oil and gas, so it's all connected. It's all just like our water. Our water's all connected.
So now I think it's probably a good time to open it up to the floor. So if anyone has any questions for Freddy or Madonna, please, microphone's right there. You can either ask a question directly, you could ask your friend to ask a question, you could text me with your question and I'll ask it. There are many formats with which we can make this very participatory. So I see no one is rushing to the mic yet. Oh, great. Okay, please.
Okay, so this is all thanks a lot to the panelists.
Just walk into the mic, just walk closer, yeah.
So,
There you go. Perfect.
so thank you to the panelists and to Climate Justice as well for an excellent panel and discussion. We're honored to have you here on this unceded territory. First of all, I'd like to ask Freddy what KK Canada refers to, and also I'd like to hear a little bit more and understand a little bit better the notion of conflicting ontologies. So that's two little questions for Freddy, and quickly for Madonna, I'd like to ask you how many people there are in your nation on Cape Breton, so-called Cape Breton, and just in general, if you could elaborate a little bit more about, because I think that when you're talking about the conflict with the council and chiefs, we're talking about a product of the same settler state dynamic, which leads to divide and conquer situation, which I personally find very sad. So maybe you could comment a little bit on that, and I'd like to know more about your nation. Both of your nations, actually.
KK Canada refers to the fact that settler sovereignty was founded off that premise of racial superiority, and because it's not foreign to Turtle Island, I consider KK Canada to be nothing more than a white supremacist colony that was carved out on an Indigenous land, and also consider Justin Trudeau to be a white supremacist leader. Nothing more than that. And referring to the second question,
What's KK though?
It's spelled K-K-K-A-N-A-D-A. That's what I refer to it as. And that was actually, I picked that up from one of my elders, actually. She calls it that. For the second, in terms of differing ontologies, it's pretty simple. Like, you have this Lockean notion of understanding land as property versus, indigenous people. Not to get into pan-indigeneity, but how we understand it. Our worldview. That's what ontology is. Worldview. Our worldview is that it's an entity and it's living and breathing, and we have a responsibility to it. And like I said before, no one owns the land. No one owns the land, and our responsibility to the land is not just for here. We have a responsibility to protect the land and waters. And I heard this, I think it was from Isaac Murdoch, who said, land, if it belongs to anyone, it belongs to the unborn, to the future generations who aren't here. That's who the land belongs to. it's not a commodity like I expressed. So ontology basically just means worldviews. Yeah.
As for your question about how many people are in our nation in Cape Breton, that's only part of Mi'kma'ki. That's only one district. We have 7 districts in Mi'kma'ki, and it goes all the way from Listugush all the way down to Cape Breton. So there are 7 districts. I can't name them all off by hand right now, but there's quite a bit of them. And what I like to call the reserves are prison camps, because that's basically what they are. Shubenacadie and Eskizoni being one of the bigger ones when they try to, I would say, catalog, put us in, yeah, just what they try to do with the Jews, with the camps there. But basically that's what it is. We have prison numbers too. Those are our status cards. Mine is 476. And my prison camp number is 029. So I just kind of make fun like that. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question. And what else did you want to know?
Well, I was asking about both of you about the notion of, if we're both condemning the house, I understand.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was just mostly commenting on the fact that it's a symptom of divide and conquer dynamic. And I personally find it really sad that it's like to hear a little more about that.
Okay, maybe I should have rephrased myself. I don't hate them as an individual Mi'kmaq person. I hate what the INAC system has done to our people. So I don't hate chief and council. I hate the system, and it's a piss off what it's doing to our people. Our own chief and council are brainwashed, and I'm sorry to say, until they wake up, well then we'll still be here as grassroots.
Are there any other questions? Anyone have any other questions? Because if there are no other questions, we will, oh yeah, okay. Please, if you want to use the mic or not.
Thank you both for a great presentation. My question might be hard to answer, so you can answer, to the extent of your capacity. You talked a lot about decolonization, and so I'm wondering, ideally, what would be the end state? Like in your minds, what would the ideal decolonization look like? I say that, not in any adversarial way. I don't have any emotional attachment to KK Canada or Quebec even. So, that's my question.
Decolonization in of itself is a paradigm, and much of it is uncertain, but I always refer to even Tuck's definition of decolonization, which is the rematriation of land and culture back to indigenous peoples. What I don't think decolonization is, much like that essay, I'm not sure people read it before, but decolonization is not a metaphor. For me, there's a lot of talk about decolonizing the academy, and in my opinion, there's a distinction to be made between decolonization and indigenization of settler colonial constructs, such as university. So realistically, for me, I think a central part to decolonization, within the project of Canada, we have certain factors such as resource extraction industries, and currently in my territory, we're facing this dire threat of nuclear waste being transported across our territory through the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. So I think central to decolonization has to be the abolishment, of all oppressive colonial structures such as, prisons, and because prison, it's designed, to punish indigenous people, because especially, looking at the rates of incarceration, indigenous people are, even though we number like 4% population, we actually, prisons and jails actually consist of over 50% of indigenous people. And decolonization, I might have those numbers wrong, but for me, decolonization means abolishing, all colonial structures like prison and resource extraction, and, and rematriating that land, even if it means radically reorganizing, how communities are structured in Canada, because, for most reserves, they are built within the vicinity of another settlement. So in my territory in Sagamok, there's a township called Massey. So I think something that just has to happen in the process, and I know this is really radical to think about, but in terms of reorganizing, Turtle Island, I think someday that town is just gonna have to, be picked up and moved elsewhere, or, even burned down, because, these towns and these sites, they really interfere with a lot of, our modes of like survivance, such as, food sovereignty. If you have towns and roads and transportation systems that are, affecting our animals and, our plants, and here's something else to refer to in terms of global solidarity, is that a lot of roads on Turtle Island actually used to lead to, so-called Latin America. And all of those roads were paved over with concrete and, transportation systems and, on-time delivery systems. All of those roads used to lead down to Latin America. So I think we have to someday, deconstruct those ideas of colonial structures and rebuild, those pre-colonial forms of how society was organized, and that including plants and animals and how we organize our societies as well, and rebuilding that relationality with other than human actors such as plants and animals. Strengthening that relationality and solidarity with basically like things that aren't human, and actually having a respect for things such as plants and animals. Sorry to keep repeating that, but I think central decolonization has to be removing those structures, and because like I mentioned before, we're on an apocalyptic trajectory, and we don't have a lot of time left.
Don't forget the fungus, Freddy, along with the plants and animals. Okay, so also you had a question here.
Hi, can you hear me? Am I, is it loud enough? I listened to a webinar on the internet today from the Climate Reality Project, and they were talking about how, in addition to divestment of fossil fuels, they've started to have lawsuits against fossil fuel companies for the damages that they have done to cities, towns, villages, and so on. And I was thinking that that might be something that you would want to look into, finding lawyers who would be willing to conduct lawsuits against Junex and petroleum and so on for the damage that they have done to your way of life and to your water and your land. They have been succeeding in the United States. We don't yet have one here in Canada, but it's possible. And that would be another angle besides the divestment, and a really good one, I think, for all of us, but especially you, because you've got proof of the damage that was done to you. Just asking whether you have thought of that.
Yeah, we have thought of that, but like again, we're grassroots and we don't have a lot of money. It's the chiefs and councils within the government that have all the money. So basically what we do is we wait for them to take us to court while we're on the land, and take them to court that way, and we win in court that way. We never actually, we've been so busy fighting all these little fights everywhere in our territory, anywhere in Mi'kmaq territory. We've been fighting all these little fights, and we haven't had time to actually do it and get together with our allies and produce this lawsuit.
Well, that might be an angle, because the chap who spoke was with the West Coast Environmental Law, which is a non-profit. I'm pretty sure that's not a fancy law firm. Check into your allies and see if there's an environmental law group that might take it up. And it wouldn't be your money, it would be voluntary.
Okay, great. I'll look into that. Thank you.
Is this okay? Yeah? I was just thinking about what you were speaking about like the actual actively retreating land and I guess like, physically, legally doing that. And I have a friend, we were speaking about like something related to this recently because she works with an organization called If Not Now, which is concerned with, I guess, changing Jewish North American opinion. It's a Jewish-led organization around birthright in Israel, and they have they're trying to organize like a mass movement of young Jewish people who are about the age so that they would be eligible to do birthright to return the birthright, and they're doing like very well with it. And I was just wondering, like, speaking as a settler on the land, like if you knew of any movements that were sort of like actively trying to give back concrete land. If so, what sort of place you thought that had within the movement? Because when I was speaking to my friend, she was talking about the difficulty in building a mass movement to change people's minds who might be less politically engaged with these things, but also, in a way, the necessity for the conversation around it to be a bit simplified to get people on board. Yeah, I hope that makes sense as a question. I was just wondering if you could speak to anything you know like that, and what place you see that having with the work that you both do. I can clarify something needed. Sorry if I was a bit. Was there something that was not quite clear? Do I need to explain a bit more about birthright and what that means exactly? Because I may have not explained myself well. Yeah, would you like me to?
Yeah, I think I understand your point. I think it's Canada's manual who's actually returning and who's actually working towards restoring things like birth and also not legitimizing that colonial structure I believe it's her who actually hasn't registered her child, as someone in the paternal umbrella of Canada. And for myself, I think I see like a lot of value in that as well. Like, for me, whenever I have kids, if that ever happens, whatnot, my kids are never going through any colonial education system. They're not, I'm going to be taking them on the land, and, I'm going to be hopefully, helping to establish, that sovereignty that needs to happen, that we need to develop as well, by not engaging within things like, registering our kids. So, speaking more broadly about sovereignty and repatriating land back to Indigenous women, because as Madonna said, originally Indigenous people, it was a matrilineal society, and that's how we were structured. And I believe like restoring that, that dynamic has a lot of value, for Indigenous people, and trying to, eliminate that patriarchal system that was Bible thumped into us. And that's one of the most destructive aspects of settler colonialism, was how the whole system managed to, mobilize this dynamic with Indigenous peoples, where we're reproducing, colonialism against ourselves as well. That cycle of violence, that's something that, is a result and is a technology of settler colonialism. And, even things like internal colonialism, Frantz Fanon wrote about this in Black Skin, White Mask. And I think that is one of the strongest barriers that we as Indigenous people have collectively, is that internal colonization and those modes of assimilation that were driven into us through technologies of dispossession, such as residential school and the 60 scoop and millennium scoop, and all those technologies of assimilation. So I think what you're alluding to is, restoring those Indigenous forms and trying to get away from that colonial mindset, that colonial mentality that we have. And like Madonna, I don't hate anyone on chief and council, like individually, like my auntie is on chief and council, but I do hate that, that structure and that framework. And alluding to the earlier question in terms of lawsuits, the Canadian system is structured in a way where it's not going to challenge its own legitimacy, and it always works reproductively to serve its own benefit, its own continuation with that settler sovereignty. So I think what we're seeing right now is like things like the MMIWG inquiry. We're seeing it fail because it's taking place within this colonial framework. It's not being led with ceremony. More traditional families are being shut out of the inquiry, and engaging within any kind of framework, such as lawsuits against corporations. In my opinion, this is just my perspective, that only gives it a legitimacy that is not earned. That's the same framework that I carry in terms of how I think about reconciliation. Is there are so many assimilative aspects within reconciliation, and even UNJust as well, such as Article 21, that encourage Indigenous people to participate within neoliberal economies and get away from our original bush economies that we used to have before colonization, and things like economic development and resource revenue sharing, or affirmative action employment strategies. These are only things that are meant to disconnect us as Indigenous people and remove us from the land. So I love land and water protectors like Canahoo's Manual and so many others on Turtle Island. who understand that one of the biggest consequences of colonization and one of the biggest impacts of genocide against us was how we were removed from the land. So I think things like, home birth and returning, to those modes of resurgence has to be central in terms of how we assert our sovereignty as Indigenous people.
That will be the last intervention, unless there is one last quick burning question out there. Nope, okay, so you're gonna have the last question.
I wanted to know what you thought of, sometimes it's like difficult from the exterior to understand like internal dynamics in the communities with the chiefs and everything, and I was wondering what you thought of the Treaty Alliance against tar sand expansion, which is like a chief-led political strategy battle against tar sand. I wanted to have your opinion on that. Yeah, the Treaty Alliance against tar sand expansion.
It's a coalition of many different chiefs across Turtle Island, and they're having a battle, a coalition-led battle against tar sand expansion. And part of the campaign is that they're divesting. They're trying to get different banks to divest from tar sands. So she's asking what you think of that kind of initiative.
Do you know what chiefs? Is it the AFN chiefs? Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. But again, the AFN is another organization that can be simply manipulated by the Canadian government. So that's the way I look at it right now anyway. Till I look further into it, I don't know too much about it. But that's the way I look at it.
Cautiously optimistic. I'm very curious to see where this coalition leads to. But I do distrust anything that doesn't involve grassroots, communities, because, and I know things are organized a lot differently between the U.S. and Canada in terms of, their reservations and ours, and how, the Dawes Act was erected to oppress, and, Indian Act, but I think there's structural similarities between both sides of the border. But for myself, yeah, I'm a little cynical. If anything, it's not grassroots led, because, any kind of, organization like the AFN, it has a natural compromise quality to it. But yeah, I guess it's encouraging to see that, all these tribes and coalitions are forming. But I hope something comes from it. But I put a lot more faith in what the grassroots can do, because they operate outside of those colonial constructs, such as the Indian Act, and the grassroots is so dangerous in terms of challenging that settler sovereignty and unsettling spatial boundaries such as pipelines or territoriality or any of that shit. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but funny story, I'm not sure if that is the same coalition that was formed, but after reoccupation, I think there's a statement released by the Treaty Alliance that said they were influenced by how we led with ceremony on Parliament in settling on Canada 150. So as long as they're leading with ceremony, I give them a little bit of legitimacy, but knowing that it's chiefs, and I know how chiefs have that colonial mentality, and I don't know too many chiefs who've been out to ceremony, but if they're leading with ceremony, it could be a very potent coalition that's formed, and it's definitely something that I'm curious about following further, and I hope it leads to somewhere constructive, or deconstructive, I guess.
Okay, maybe, do we have any last words? Because we're going to have to wrap it up. I don't know if Madonna or Freddy Freddy, if you had any last words to say. You're good. Anything you want to? Okay.
Okay, I guess I should, just out of respect for the organizers who are helping me, I'm having like this event on Saturday, and it's to help me raise legal funds for my participation in the June X blockade. So if you're in the Ottawa area, and even if you don't have any money, but I suspect a lot of you do have a lot of money, please, I encourage you to come out, because we're gonna have performers, and it promises to be a strong community building event. And you know, when we're tackling these settler colonial structures, it's all about community and mobilizing as community. So if not for the fundraising aspect, you know, just please come out if you can, and you know, community is the way that we're going to get out of this, in my opinion. But other than that, yeah, sorry to like pump my own event, but I don't know. I'm kind of hurting for money as well. These like legal fees are piling up, and I could use some help, so thank you.
Really quickly, I know that there was a crowdfunder that was up earlier on for you. Is that still available in the link, or is there a way for people to support financially if it comes to Ottawa? So we can also share it on the event page so everyone can have it. I'm just going to quickly find a hat, and then we're going to do a quick walk around to see if anyone has any donations to give to Freddy to help with legal fees. Go to my hat.
So I just wanted to just thank you so very much for having come to speak to us and teach us so much about these issues. And also to thank all the different people who helped. People put up these chairs, they set up the table, several student unions gave money. So thank you to everyone who helped. And especially, most of all, thank you for taking time out of your lives to come and share this information with us. And inconveniencing yourselves by coming here. So thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, and I'm supposed to make an announcement that there are a lot of materials on this table here. There's like posters, and they should all leave. If you want them, please take them with you. There's some beautiful posters, and there's some other things as well, some magazines and things like that.